Hallelujah.
Thank you very much, Angela. Okay.
Okay. So I want to talk about reasons for migrations. And so some of the people are migrated because of the forms of violence that have occurred, put their life in danger, and they need asylum. It could be somebody that is like a woman that we rescued from being a wife of a gang leader who was also a drug trafficker, and he had her locked in his house for 4 years. And she escaped. Her cousin helped her, and she escaped. And then her cousin was murdered as he was hunting her down. And so she had to go to the States. There was nowhere to hide because in Honduras, there are not programs like in the United States. And when I speak of Honduras, I'm actually speaking of pretty much all of Latin America. They differ a little bit from where they are, but pretty much it's all the same. So violence against the person, they're a witness of a crime or they're a victim of a crime. There's no place for them to go. There's no witness protection program. We participate as a refuge, and we do receive persons for witness protection. But then there's also the issue of looking for a better life, work, or wants to join a family member. And as I talk about all these things, if you're working with immigrants in your church, your community, or if you're a lawyer who's helping them with a case, all of these things apply. So a lot of people are looking for a better life or work, or they want to join a family member who's already there. When you look at these situations with immigrants, you really need to understand the background of their story, because when we hear it, we relate it to our own personal experience. So when you say, oh, she went to the hospital, well, why can't she go to the hospital? In the United States, you can just walk in the hospital. Here, there are guards with guns at gates, and you can't enter the hospital unless you have a specific reason to enter the hospital. It's very difficult. So, I mean, you then think, well, why aren't they working? Well, before COVID, we had a 49% unemployment rate with a 71% total of unemployed and underemployed. And then, like I said in the earlier, March 15, 2020, boom, we are on lockdown. You are arrested if you leave your house. We were on lockdown for over 265 days. The only reason why it was lifted was the hurricanes. And so, people lost work. They can't eat. They're starving. They don't have the ability for supporting their families. So they'll go to the States with the hope of a better life. Natural disaster. So we've got the COVID, and we've got two major hurricanes that hit us. And this has completely wiped out businesses and families and homes and jobs. And it happens in the moment, and it's on the news, and then time goes by and you're looking at other things, but we're still sitting here in this disaster with people who have no homes. People are in tents along the streets. And my husband and I, when we do go out, we have a bag of Manapack food, because on the sides of the streets, on the intersections, there are mothers holding children. There are children there. There are fathers with children. There are old ladies. There are men in wheelchairs begging for food because they have no way to feed themselves. So then there's the criminal activities, which includes parental kidnapping and sex trafficking and all of that. So this is the reasons why people are migrating. And the things that you need to understand about your client or the person that you're getting to know, this is really important. Your client, the immigrant, does not trust authority and believes that authorities might harm them. They don't trust authorities. I have gone to the police and they have said to me, we can't do anything. An example would be a pregnant woman, 4 hours on foot in bus on dirt roads, covered with bruises, comes to the police here in Tolanga to put a domestic violence report. And the person who receives her, the investigator who's on turn to take the report, says, you can't be here. You got to go and put it up in Orica, where you came from. We can't help you, and throws her out on the street at 4 o'clock at night. There's no buses going back to where she lives. She's bruised, she's covered, but the law states that they are required to take care of her. And there was a refuge that she could stay in 30 feet from where that DPI officer was telling her and berating her. And I was called and came back, and there was a big fight between me and that officer. And I called the colonel, and the colonel came and ordered the person to do it. And we cared for her all night. So, I mean, clients don't trust authorities. Also, we've had clients, one that we rescued from an abusive drug dealing criminal organization guy. When she escaped and went to the police actually, when they found out she was his wife, they said, okay, we'll take you to a refuge, and took her back to her husband and said, you better take better care of your property. So then there's the culture of your client to not report things that have happened to authorities. Here, nobody reports. There's less than 30% of all special crimes are reported because nothing happens. The authorities don't do anything, or they get paid off, or corruption, someone pays the money and they make the case disappear. Authorities re-victimize the victims. And the client is just like, why even bother? And then your client is going to fear revenge if they tell what's happened. Here, there is a culture of no reporting, and there's a culture of revenge. If you speak up, they murder you. That's the way they solve the problems here. And so there's a great deal of fear that if I speak up, or if I go as a witness to help somebody, I'm going to be murdered. And so what that does is, when you encounter people from other countries who have immigrated, especially if they've migrated because of violence, they're not going to trust authority figures. You can say, well, let's go get you help here. They're not going to want to go, and maybe they're being victims in the United States. And you're like, well, let's help you get the help you need. And they're not going to want to report. They're going to be afraid of revenge. They're going to be afraid of deportation. And the other thing to understand is that these children of God are suffering severe trauma. And they're not going to trust you, no matter what you say or do in the beginning. They're not going to trust you until you enter into their pain, until you enter into their darkness and establish a relationship with them, a real relationship with them. And so to gain the trust of your client or the immigrant with whom you're working, you need to gain their trust by spending time with them. You need to ask them what their needs are and help them, receive their needs. You need to spend time listening to them. And anything that you can do to gain their trust will give you the ability to assess their true situation and needs. And gaining their trust will also help them open up to you and give detailed information regarding their story. And so this is what we use to build an asylum case for somebody, but it's also how we can help the client, the immigrant in your community. So important things you can do to help your client with asylum, and maybe also in your church. Obtain and understand the details of their life, their story. Why did they migrate? What were the country conditions where they lived when they left? And what are the country conditions now? Is there a way that they can go back now? And if they can't go back now, you can help them find a way through the legal system to stay in the States. The other thing is that this is specifically for lawyers handling asylum cases. The person interviewing your clients needs to be fluent in their language. They need to know your client's culture, and they should be trained in interviewing techniques. So the interviews with your client, with the immigrant in asylum cases, needs to have sufficient time for the client to relax and relate all of their story. And here's an example. My friend is a lawyer in Alabama, and I had gone to the United States. And the day I arrived in Atlanta, she called me and said that she had a case that she was representing, a 16-year-old Guatemalan girl who was sex trafficked to the United States, and that she wanted me to help with the interview because the Alabama ABI, Bureau of Investigation, did not have a fluent interviewer who was trained, who knew the culture. And she wanted to make sure that all of the information came correctly from her client. Well, ABI, they didn't want to wait 6 days for me to arrive and do it because I had other commitments. So they did somebody else, and came back and said she was not sex trafficked, but when she finally got to Alabama, someone had her have sex with 4 or 5 guys in a hotel room. And that's the end of the story. Well, I went to see her when I got to Alabama, because I was in Atlanta, in Georgia, and I was taken to see her, and I entered as Mummy Gracie, which is the persona that I have with clients. And I sat down and started speaking to her. We were at a horse farm, and I spent 8 hours with her, and she shared her story. And because I understand the culture, there might be like a word she says that's like an alarm for me for something. Also because I'm an experienced interviewer who's trained in interviewing techniques. I know where to let her talk and listen and pick up on things and what questions to ask. So this is how it turned out. She has a baby in Guatemala, and her boyfriend left her, and she was living with her parents, and her aunt in Guatemala sold her to traffickers, separated her from her baby, where she was brought all the way to the United States. She was sexually abused along the way for money, which is sex trafficking. And then she was held prisoner in Texas for a while. And then her aunt came and picked her up in Texas and took her to Indiana, where her aunt had her working in a hotel as a maid, but was also selling her to men for sex. And then another man bought her from the aunt and then trafficked her to Alabama, where they had her working in a gas station as a cashier. But when she got phone calls, she was sold to men. And one of the instances was where they called her and said, at 8 o'clock tonight at this hotel, you're going to meet these 4 men and you're going to service them. So by having the full story, we were able to prove to immigration that she could get a T visa for sex trafficking, and also work on getting her baby out of the custody of these people who sold her into sex trafficking. But she was also a witness for the US federal government because she remembered every single name, every single place, and all of that. But nobody took the time to sit down and we sat there for 8 hours and we just chatted. We were outside, we were on a porch, we were at a table eating, and it was relaxed and all of that. So these types of things are really, really important. And because your client is most likely suffered trauma, or the person you're getting to know, it's important for you to help them get psychological and psychiatric evaluation to determine if they are suffering post-traumatic stress disorder for 2 reasons. One is because they need help with that. And 2, it also helps establish the suffering because of the violence that they suffered. It would also be good to see if you can have a social worker do a family study to see what things your clients need, and make sure your client has a complete medical evaluation. Does she have high blood pressure? Does she have diabetes? These are the different things that you want to look for. The other thing, if you're working as a lawyer in asylum cases, and I run into this all the time, these things I'm saying because I've experienced this with lawyers who didn't know what questions to ask and what to do with their clients to help them with asylum cases. But this one right here in asylum cases, find out if your client has been forced to have sexual relations, was raped, or had been forced to prostitute during their migration. That moves them into a whole new area for options for asylum. Find out if they've been held for ransom during their migration. Find out if they've been forced to carry drugs, because I've had a male client who was human trafficked for work and made a slave and escaped, that he actually noted the names and the places and the phone numbers and all of that, so that the DEA was actually able to track the drug traffickers who forced him to carry drugs to the States. And then find out if your client was brought to the USA against their will. That has happened in many cases. These things can help cases. So you really, really need to understand their story. You need to see life from your client's perspective and experience. I mentioned this in the panel. When you think of going to the hospital, you have in your mind what it means to go to the hospital. Here, it's almost impossible to get into the hospital. But then the hospital available for the public is a nightmare. They don't have services, they don't have doctors, they don't have medicines. Someone has to pay for, we had a child in the hospital with a huge tumor, and they handed me vials and said, take the baby out of the bed, go take a taxi down the street to a lab and get their lab test and bring the child back. And I'm like, the child's not leaving. So we took the blood, sent the vials by taxi. I come in and I have to have the wipies and I have to have the sand. It's just, you got to understand the reality of their story. Last night I appeared back with wet hair. It takes over an hour to heat my water to take a shower. People don't have electricity. They have latrinas. Protection orders mean nothing because the police won't respond or there's no police in the area. See the life from your client's perspective and experience, and don't apply what you know to be. Find out what it is really like and investigate the conditions. Get photos, talk to people who've been there, be detailed in your questions. These are also things to get to know the person that you're getting to know, and you need to tell their story. And for asylum cases, The judge needs to know and see the situation of the person, you need to be able to clearly demonstrate the life conditions your client comes from, the dangers of the return, and any medical or psychological damage they have as a result of their traumas in their home country to the judge. And like I said, most people apply what they hear to what they know and end up with an incorrect perspective on the reality of the country and living conditions the immigrant has suffered. And it's just so important, getting to know them, having a relationship. Just briefly, the country conditions here. I can't see the top of my thing. There's something about is gangs, violence, the machismo. Women and children are property of the man, the corruption that infiltrates every level of this government, negligence by authorities, the COVID crisis destroying everything, the hurricanes destroying a great portion of the infrastructure in this country, and the devastating unemployment situation here. Just a quick thing on rule of law ratings from the World Justice Project, just on Honduras. The surrounding countries are similar. Worldwide, Honduras rates 116, worst out of 128. For the region, it's 27 out of 30. Constraints on government powers, 119 out of 128 worldwide. Absence of corruption is 114th worst country out of 128. It scored a 0.32. Civil justice, 112 out of 128. And criminal justice, 123 out of 128. The United Nations has said that only that 94 to 96% of all special crimes against people, this is vulnerable groups, goes without justice, so with impunity. One point real quick, and then I'm going to come back and answer questions if there's time. I want to point out something. I am devastated to see these children being tossed over walls. I am devastated to see the little boy in the desert crying because he was abandoned. But there's one point nobody is addressing. And with the reports of children flooding into the USA, most without parents or with only one, there's some serious legal issues to be addressed. And I've personally seen these situations. There are parents who are in the USA, aggressors against women, men, who don't like what their wife is doing in the United States. And they get somebody to rob, to kidnap their child and bring them to the United States as punishment to the wife. And then we have parents in Honduras who are sending their children or bringing them to the USA without the consent of the other parent. Something needs to be addressed in this issue of the child migration, because the laws here in Honduras say that it is a criminal offense to remove a child from their family without the family's consent. And it is a criminal offense to remove a child from this country without the permission of both parents or a court order. So here I am for questions. I'm going to just put up here and for a second, my information. This is being recorded, so you can get the recording. My email is gracie@heartofchristhonduras.org. Our website is hocjusticeproject.org. Donations can be made at the Kindful address. You can talk to me through WhatsApp. We have a YouTube channel. We have an Instagram account and a Twitter account. So at this point, I'm gonna stop the share and come back and see if you're all there, because I haven't heard a sound. Stop the share. There we go. We're back.
Gracie, that's powerful and heart-wrenching as we look at from the American perspective and hear the political rhetoric of what's going on towards the people. So from hearing from your perspective why people would leave and what the conditions are is very informative and gut-wrenching.
My first trip to Tegucigalpa, I live 30 miles outside of Tegucigalpa. Sometimes we have to go there for provisions, but after the lockdown, when I got permission from the government to travel any day for business relating to our rescue and work, the first time I went to Tegucigalpa after the lockdown was emotionally traumatizing. The entire 54 kilometers between here and Tegu in the mountains, families on the side of the road with signs, help me feed my child. I have no food to feed my children tonight. old people, and then every intersection, they're just there begging for food and stuff. And so I was extremely traumatized because I wasn't prepared to help them along the way, and to be knowing these are my neighbors, these are the people that I live with. These are my people. I mean, yes, I'm an American, but these are my people, and my brothers and my sisters in Christ who don't have food to feed their children, and they're just begging. I mean, hundreds of them, the entire 54 kilometers in every intersection to go. And so from that point forward, we always made sure that we either had small cash or we have these mana packs. Lee, can you grab me a mana pack so I can show them? Which are things that they do for food in places where there are no food. I'll show it in just a second, to make sure that we have them in the car, and that when we are faced with a family, thank you, sweetheart. These are the mana packs here. And they have full nutrition. You just cook them with, they're from Feed My Starving Children in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Another missionary here brings them in by the truckload and donates to us. And so we've had these. This will give a full day's supply to a family of 4 to 6 people, just boiled in 4 ounces of water. So like we just went to Tegu the other day, and it's like, stop the car, get the bag, you know. So are there questions? Do people have questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning.
Gracie, I have a question. You mentioned at the end of your presentation about parents who send their children away without the other parent's knowledge. Either way, sending them out of the U.S. or, and I think the concern from the U.S. point of view is when they come into or try to get in at the border into the U.S., there's been a lot of talk about how these children, they have to detain them, guess put them in cages, but detain them because they have to figure out if they're coming in with traffickers, if they're coming in having been separated. So, you know, it's like these are not just children who are coming in because they need help, but they might actually be abused. And so these methods are protecting the children. Can you comment on that and help clarify, like, how much truth is there? How much concern is there from your perspective?
So yes, children are being used to traffic drugs. Children are being abused. Children are being taken away from parents, and it may be another family member, or the father is in the States and they're taking the child away and sending them with the traffickers. The one thing that we work closely with DNAF, which is the Direction, it's the child welfare system. And DNAF has an entire system to work with these children who have immigrated. And all it will take for the federal government in the United States to find out if this child is parental kidnapping or trafficked or whatever, is to work with the office in Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula for DNAF. And because we work closely with the regional leader for protection of children, and we know the director personally, and those of us who have children's homes have suffered attention from DNAF, because DNAF is trying to work in the situation of preventing children on the borders from leaving, and on the reintegration of children when they come back. Because I have cases of men who have called me from the United States, because my phone number is known all over Honduras. And so they'll say, well, my wife has a new man and I don't like what he's doing. So I need to find out what I can do to get my child away from her and bring my child to the United States. And so my response to them was to talk to DNAF and have an investigation done to see if the child is a victim of violence. But I'm also receiving phone calls from women who are victims of violence who say that their husband's brother came to pick up their child to go visit the grandmother and disappeared. And they took them to the United States. And it would be like a reason to continue the violence against the woman, because they always tell the woman, you need to stay with me, you need to do this, because I'll take your children away from you and you'll never see them again. And so then there are women here who are abused, and they and their children go on the migration thing to get away from their abuser. But then there are also, it's a freaking nightmare. And I've never heard anybody say on any of the news reports that I've done anything about looking into parental kidnapping. Because I'm willing to bet from the knowledge that I know that at least 20% of all of those children going to the United States without a parent or with only one parent are in a case of child kidnapping, parental kidnapping.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Can you hear me well? So my question with this for you, knowing all of this dysfunction that we have in that country, pretty much all of the Latin American countries. I'm from Mexico, so I know about dysfunction. We have our own dysfunction. What is the church doing? What is the church teaching? I believe that God has taught us how to love one another. I believe that the Bible has a roadmap of how to have a functional family. God can fix that, but we have to have the church teach the man how to treat the woman, how the woman treat a man, how to raise your children, how to obey everything that we need, God has provided for us. In the church, it has not been a place to go. We don't supposed to run into the United States. We're supposed to run into the church. Where is the church in Honduras?
Okay, so one of the things that we do, and it says we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to talk real fast, is we are focusing on training the pastors and also speaking in churches, training the missionaries here that God has called us all to justice. There's the word mishpat, which is related to, which is the word justice, but it's about how God views how we treat the vulnerable in our community. And so we need the churches to wake up. We're speaking to churches in the States. We're presenting programs on YouTube. I'm writing all the programs right now. We'll be holding classes to teach in the States with Americans, but also to teach in Honduras and other countries that we need to wake up. If we want strong families and we want communities without violence, and we want people not migrating because of violence, people to be able to stay in their own country. The church needs to wake up, and the church needs to be the response to the problems in the community. Jesus said that we were to go and do as he did, and that we would do more because he has given us all power and authority. It's not the corrupt government. It's not the corrupt police. It's not the corrupt traffickers and drug traffickers and all of these people. The church needs to raise up. We need to wake up. We need to get to work. We need to love our brother. Yes, Judy.
Yes, Tara has asked in the chat if you would please put up your slide again with your contact information.
Okay, I'll try to do that. I'm
You
going to
can
have to
pull that
share
up
again. Yeah, share that slide. And we're going to go all the way to the end, which is right there. Come on.
Thank you.
Let's go.
Yes.
Okay, there it is. Any other questions? Do we have like 30 seconds? We're going to get booted out.
I think we still have a full minute.
Okay. So, if I'm open to talk to you, you can email me, you can text me on Facebook or Instagram or anything, or WhatsApp. If you have any questions, I'm there to help you. If you want us to speak to your church or to your group, let me know, and we'll do that too. If you want to come here, let me know, and we'll get you here and you can work alongside us. Judy?
Thank you. Wonderful, Gracie. Thank you very much for sharing and being involved in the amazing work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you. This was
God
very
bless.
informative.
Thank you to all of you for being here. I'm excited to see what else we have today. And like I said, text me, email me, call me. We're here to serve.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Guess we're gonna get booted back to the room, right?
And 3, 2, 1.
Woo! There we go.
Hello. I see you, Bonnie's here, Angela, and T. Walker. Your first name, T? Tamika. Oh, yes, of course. Great to see you. I love putting names and faces together. Welcome, welcome. Now, I am going to share the screen. Ubani is going to lead more of this than I will, but we are going to engage in a discussion. And hopefully, what we'll be doing is providing some basic talking points and some ideas so that then you can join in with us and we can share back and forth.